Hi, welcome to Grammar's State of Mind. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Grammer. First, I want to thank all the new subscribers from the last couple of weeks, and I really appreciate all the thoughtful feedback on the last episode, the one where we talked about the AI-generated video that Donald Trump posted of him in the fighter jet. Your engagement in those videos really kind of keeps the conversations meaningful, and it helps me both improve my videos and know what to talk about next. Today, we're going to continue exploring the psychology beneath our politics and culture. And this episode is going to focus on the Great Gatsby themed Halloween party at Mar-a-Lago. It was a lavish, hedonistic affair that took place while millions of Americans are facing the threat of hunger. I'll unpack the psychology behind this tableau and how wealth can dull empathy, and how the elite and ultra wealthy may be putting their sense of superiority and entitlement on full display. So let's set the scene a bit. For those that haven't seen the videos that leaked out of the Mar-a-Lago party, it shows kind of what you would imagine. There's this extravagant decor, women in sequin costumes lounging inside these life-size champagne or martini glasses, and an older, wealthier crowd that's sitting around sipping cocktails while really luring at the spectacle of it all. The vibe really is pure Gatsby. Plutocrats at play. And honestly, who in strategic communications thought this was the right theme right now? It's a terrible idea. All this is happening while supplemental nutrition assistance has basically not been funded and people are at risk of food insecurity and hunger. And this is despite Congress already having passed legislation so that it would be funded even in the event of a shutdown. We also have healthcare subsidies that are at risk of losing their funding, and that can drive up premiums several fold, just as the economy is weakening and inflation has risen. And this whole dichotomy of image feels almost scripted. So how do we get to this place of wealth, entitlement, and a disconnect from others? Research has consistently shown that people of higher socioeconomic status are more likely to exhibit psychological entitlement and narcissistic traits. They tend to view themselves as more deserving of resources and privileges than other people. Research further suggests that wealth can cloud moral judgment and reduce compassion. For example, a study by UC Berkeley found that in San Francisco, where, like most places, cars are legally required to stop for pedestrians, drivers of luxury vehicles were 4 times less likely to yield to pedestrians. They were also far more likely to be cutting off other drivers on the road. And then there's the study by Cote out of the University of Toronto, published in 2020, which shows that those who were born into wealth and who remain wealthy are especially prone to these feelings of entitlement. So when we look at this Gatsby-styled party, the psychology aligns with this research, this idea of separateness and superiority, and a sense that others exist to serve and entertain. It isn't just bad optics. It's the behavioral expression of class-conditioned narcissism. The Great Gatsby, with Jay Gatsby's dazzling parties, mask this emotional void, an endless pursuit of this idea of validation through performance and demonstrations of wealth. His facade hides this moral emptiness and loneliness. And likewise, the Mar-a-Lago party becomes a performance of this privilege. Attendees act out their fantasies of success and dominance, while the economic foundations beneath ordinary Americans is cracking. And the result is a living metaphor for elite consumption paired with social neglect. And it's a reenactment of the same moral corrosion that Fitzgerald wrote about a century ago. Let's take a closer look at the psychological lens to what this event communicates. First, we'll start with the imagery of women who are being displayed as decor, really this objectification, where they're literally dancing and positioned inside life-sized champagne or martini glasses. This can convey the idea that people are consumable props. And psychologically, that's a power dynamic, where you have the consumer class versus the consumed class. And this actually resonates with a little bit of Trump's branding, from beauty pageants to The Apprentice, where he has used others who are staged for his advancement and gratification. When people revel in the extravagance while millions potentially go hungry, the implicit message is those other people don't count. High income inequality erodes that sense of empathy, and it weakens the social bonds that can tie one group's well-being to another's. The guest behavior may reflect a sense that the collective obligations we have towards one another are optional, and that they can enjoy the benefits of society without bearing the responsibility for its pain. For this fantasy to hold, you have to have some degree of cognitive dissonance. The suffering that others have has to be invisible. The wealthy rarely see food lines or unpaid rent notices. And when this suffering is distant, any sense of empathy that someone may have loses the sense of urgency. This whole party may not just be a tone-deaf spectacle, but part of a broader social conditioning. The withdrawal of food and healthcare benefits, while elites are kind of flaunting this luxury, can send a subliminal message. Know your place. Studies on inequality show that when people perceive themselves as lower in status, upward comparisons can trigger chronic stress and a lower sense of self-worth. Consumerism, if you think about it, thrives on that tension. It's the endless chase to close the gap, to buy your way toward equality. Think about getting the next version of the latest iPhone, or the next car, or the bigger house, trying to keep up with, as they used to say, the Joneses. But the problem is when upward mobility feels impossible, people may internalize that inferiority. And over time, that normalization can cement the hierarchy, where people will think, I deserve less and they deserve more. And that entrenches this idea of a class system. Citizens then are left feeling betrayed, helpless, and even nihilistic to their position. Let's zoom out a bit and look at this more broadly. You have the ruling class that can see itself as exceptional and above the rules of ordinary society, which sounds familiar, right? And then the party reinforces that self-image. That resources that we have and the sort of bodies of people and the leisures that we can engage in exist really only for the consumption of the ultra-wealthy and elite. Sociologist Thorstein Veblen called this the leisure class, and it's a group that's defined not by production, but by the conspicuous consumption that they engage in. When elites live as if social obligations are optional and the rest of society watches their excesses with their own scarcity, it doesn't just breed this resentment, but it hardens these social roles. People begin to identify with their class position as being immutable. And that's how societies drift towards castes, where inequality becomes inevitable. What makes this moment so haunting to me is that it may expose a deeper belief that for some people, equality itself is not an inalienable right. The Gatsby party was a spectacle of defiance, as if to say, we've won, and the rest of you are exploitable and irrelevant. And it mirrors an economy that I think is increasingly engineered to reward the few, while the many are left watching from the margins, and their exclusion is turned into someone else's entertainment. That is not democracy. That's moral decay. I'm Jeffrey Grammer, and this has been Grammer's State of Mind. Thank you for listening. And remember, the measure of a civilization isn't found in its wealth, but in how it treats those with the least champagne in their glass. If you liked today's video, please consider liking and subscribing. And in the comments section, tell me what you'd like to hear about next. I do my best to read those, and I really take what you say to heart. I appreciate the feedback. Until next time, Stay safe, stay informed, and stay human. Thank you.